Welcome everybody, all our followers and viewers to this SY Israel platform. My name is Joey Harari. I'm going to be moderating this roundtable discussion, which today will focus on business, workplace, careers of the Olim, which transitioned from the United States, from New York in particular, to Israel. We are going to bring you representations of varied backgrounds, so hopefully the information you get from this roundtable discussion will help you. Will help you for those considering Aliyah. That's what we do. We try to offer information, guidance, and God be with you, Be'ezrat Hashem. Okay, so let's start around the table and just get a synopsis of what you're all about. We'll start with Ezra.
Hi, my name is Ezra Barry. I live in Ra'anana and I work for an Israeli software technology company, and I've been doing that for a couple of years now, and pass it on.
My name is Moshe Arking. I live in Modi'in, made Aliyah 11 years ago, and I work for an American apparel company. I've been there for about 26, 27 years, and so when I decided to make Aliyah, I continued working from remotely, and I work New York hours from Israel.
I'm Matthew Salmon. I have a consulting company here in Israel servicing domestic companies in the United States, and I'm able to do most of the work remotely.
Hi, I'm Solomon Swade. I live in Yerushalayim. I'm a pediatrician, and I work in Beit Shemesh for one of the 4 kupot here called Klalit, and I'll get into the journey of transferring over medical professions in a bit.
Hi, my name is Ricky Shweki. I live in Ra'anana, Israel. I made Aliyah 3 years ago. I run a data consulting company in the States. I have a partner in the States and primarily deal with clients in the States. And I have a mixed schedule working both Israel and American hours.
So we brought here together people who work in Israel, like every other Israeli, found positions and jobs in Israel, with entrepreneurs from New York that set up shop here, employees from companies in New York that set up shop here, professionals that, we'll get into that more, that have to transfer all types of licenses and go through that process. And so we want to give you as much information as we can. So let's start the discussion, and feel free to chime in, everybody, if you have anything to add to the conversation. Let's talk about the Pre-Aliyah phase, where you decided that it's something you want to do, and now you got to deal with, okay, how am I going to make a living in Israel, and how does that work? Let's start with Ricky.
Sure. Yeah, so to be honest, thinking about moving to Israel along with my job was complex. I wasn't quite sure how it would work. I think that was one of my biggest fears of moving to Israel. But it was also one of the reasons that I went into what I went to in terms of consulting and having flexibility to run my own business and deal with clients in a way that I had a little bit more control of my time. So my wife and I spoke about it for a couple of years, trying to figure it out, trying to develop the business and get it to a point where it could run in a way that I could work from Israel. And once we ultimately made the decision, thank God I had a partner in the company, so we oriented it where he would continue to manage accounts in the States and I would work from here. And so thank God it did transition very well. I was nervous at first.
Was there pushback?
There was definitely some pushback, but I think it was pretty matter of fact that we were moving and it wasn't really so much of a discussion. So we just had to figure out how to make it work ultimately. And thank God for my clients, it was very smooth, the transition. In fact, it was even better for me, I think, because I was able to do more work in the morning hours when people were asleep, and then suddenly they'd wake up and I'd have work done for them, which was, I think, interesting for them. And then at the same time, I had a partner in the States who was able to be available for them in the later hours. It's kind of like the company has just now expanded our working horizon, which I thought was awesome. And yeah, thank God, it went very well. We moved in, I was working from home for a little bit at first, and then we took an office, and it's been great. I can't
do business in Israel as well?
I don't do business with clients in Israel, but I do have working developers here, and I found some partners that I'm working with here in Israel.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Dr. Sweat.
For me, once I decided to make Aliyah, I had to figure out how to take my medical career that was really just starting off in New York and bring it over to Israel. So just like anything in life, you have to look to those who paved the way before you. So I had many conversations with doctors who made Aliyah and what that experience was like for them and what working in Israel is like. So I would say in any field that you're in, and if you want to bring that to Israel, you really should speak to those who are here so you get a sense of what working here is. Because in in reality, it's most likely going to be very different than what you're used to in America in whatever field. Specifically for medicine, Nefesh B'Nefesh definitely helps you along the path. So there are big medical conferences in New Jersey and in other cities throughout the United States, and they recommend to start switching over your license a year before Aliyah. A year before our Aliyah date, I started to submit my documentation, which was medical diplomas, transcripts, letters of good standing from my residency program, and by the time you get all of that together, submit it and get approval, it actually does take quite a while. So I do recommend starting 8 to 12 months before your Aliyah date if you are in the medical field. And also just networking. I went to several medical conferences in New Jersey. You meet people there, you hear about different opportunities, hear about different types of work-life adjustments that you'll have to make, and also what kind of salary you should be expecting. So just speaking to people, going out, networking, and really starting early is very important.
So you have to retest that.
Currently, medical professionals from America, the UK, France, they don't make you take any new licensing exams, so you don't have to do that, but they may be implementing a Hebrew proficiency exam. I'm not exactly sure when that's going to affect. I did read something online recently that they're exploring that, so that is something to keep in mind. And on that note, my whole day is in Hebrew. So you do have to have a base of Hebrew to work off of. The computer system, the EMR, I would say 95% of my patients are Israeli Hebrew speakers. So my whole day is in Hebrew. So that is definitely something to take into account if you are considering making Aliyah.
Interesting. Thank you. Nice.
So I had a unique adventure to get here, and when we go on Post-Aliyah, I'll talk about how I got into what I'm doing now, but I essentially had a 15-year career as a lender, middle market lender, to businesses in New York City. And when finally my wife gave the okay to try and figure it out, it began a 2-year process to figure out what I was going to do here. Because I did not know if what I was doing can come over here and I could do what I'm doing here, or what I was doing there over here. So I did something which was, I don't know if it was unique, but I was advised by another individual made Aliyah from the community here who worked for Citibank or Citigroup, and he told me come on an Aliyah, on a pilot trip, but a business pilot trip. So I spent about 2-3 weeks making phone calls and setting up meetings for it was a 7-day Aliyah business pilot trip, and I had over 20 meetings with finance leaders across Israel and across industries, whether it was private equity, banking, lending, insurance, etc. And that helped me realize that my skill set is needed and that something could transfer. What, I don't know. So after I did that, I came back, I was more emboldened to try to make the Aliyah work, and I started trying to figure out how to find that career or how to transition here. And I kept hitting brick walls. And it was about 2 years of brick walls that I kept hitting, because the one thing that I had to keep in mind is that in America, a good Jewish boy who knows finance is something unique. There's value to that, especially in the New York market. It's something sought after. But here in Israel, everybody's a good Jewish boy in finance. So you're a commodity. And also, if you don't have the language and you aren't here yet, it makes it that much more difficult to get a job. So I had one job offer that looked like I was going to take at another bank to build out a division, but the issue was I didn't know if I'd make it here. I'd have to build out this division for a year local, and my understanding or my thought process was that I'd probably get bogged down. It won't get me here. So I'm not leaving an institution I've been working at 10 years and having a great career to maybe get to Israel. So after that, it took me about another year. I was given a job offer to work for a VC as the head of investor relations, a different industry, and I accepted it. It was a massive pay cut, but ultimately it secured me a job to get me here, and that's what I'll leave it at, because I'm not in the VC world, and when we go further along, I'll give the story about how I transitioned to my consulting company right now.
All right.
So I think it's a couple of people already touched on it. Interesting how the number one concern is, okay, how am I going to make it when I move? And I think it's an important consideration, because I think the number one failure of Aliyah, when you see people that don't make it and go back to where they came from, the number one reason is because of job, because of employment. And so I think it's paramount to put that first and make sure that you have a plan in place and you know exactly how you're going to make it when you go. I had the good fortune of working for a company very pro-Israel, very Zionistic, and when I came forward and said, listen, I'm thinking of making Aliyah, they were like, go with our blessing and continue working. So thankfully, I didn't have a lot of that the process that some of the other people have, but they really had to start thinking about sacrificing certain aspects of their jobs or changing careers and things like that. I was able to continue. The number one concern was just the hours. The number one concern was, okay, how am I going to make it work on 7 hours time difference, starting work in the middle of the afternoon, working till late at night. What I ended up finding, and this was, you mentioned this earlier about how there's an advantage to that, you can cover different times, including, by the way, including Yom Tov and Shabbat and things like that, where we keep one day Yom Tov here, I'm there in the office working on a day when for 2 days the rest of the half of the office is out. So there are a lot of interesting angles and aspects, but I can't stress how important it is to just address that aspect of employment more than anything else. Yeah.
Ezra, you're in an interesting position because you're the only one that doesn't have pre-existing conditions.
Yeah. So,
and I could talk to a larger audience of ours because you did the very traditional, and it's very interesting. So let's hear your story.
yeah. So yeah, what Joey's talking about is I knew very early on that I was going to be making Aliyah workforce. So when I was already in university, I was preparing for my Aliyah. Once I graduated, I needed some time to kill before my Aliyah was scheduled. I had it scheduled for a year after graduation. So I went into the workforce in the US, where I was an account manager for an electronics company. And it was something to pass the time. I had studied marketing initially, and I wanted to find something in marketing. But I said, okay, for the next year until my paperwork is in order with Israel, I'm gonna find something, save a little bit of money. So I worked at this electronics company as an account manager, and then I went into, and I was not married at the time as well. It was just me. I was 23 years old. I finished at that company. I got on the plane, arrived in Israel. I arrived at an Ulpan program where we learned Hebrew. They housed me for 5 months. And during that time, I started familiarizing myself with the Israeli workforce a little bit, trying to see if my skills would be transferable, whether from the account management at the electronics company that I worked at, or if my experience, my marketing degree would help me here. And the truth is, for marketing, I did not find any entry-level positions. I didn't have the marketing experience at the time. During this Ulpan program, for my first 5 months in Israel, I played it by ear. I was like, let's see what's out there. What's the job market made of? What skills do I have? And at that point, when I finished this program, I had found a job in an online retail company, pro-Israel retail company selling Israeli goods overseas. And from there, I made my way to where I am now today. But I went in with a very open-minded kind of idea that I don't necessarily know what I'm going to do long term. And I knew that everyone that I had spoken to in similar positions was talking about how Parnassah in Israel is tough. Finding a job that you're qualified for, that you really are passionate about, something that kept coming up where people said, it's not always easy. You might have to pivot. You might have to do something different. So I came in with a very open mind saying, you know what, I might not do what I studied, but I want to find something that I like, find something that I enjoy. And several years later, I'm in a position that I enjoy, that I like. I do technical support, and yeah, that's where I am.
And married with children.
And married with children, thank God, yeah.
All right, so now you made the decisions, you did your homework, now you find yourself in Israel and you're starting out. Now there's a transition period that maybe you're thriving in, maybe you find a little challenging, maybe you find a little concerning. I want to go through those feelings and how you met those challenges, and you're still here, so I guess you overcame those challenges. So let's go with Ricky.
Sure. So I think for me, the biggest challenge is really just a transition of working at night. I think that, like you mentioned, it's definitely a change of what we're used to. And sometimes you have to work really late, and I think that's my biggest challenge, because thank God, like I mentioned, business-wise, it's been very smooth, and I think being here has led me to a lot of opportunities that surprisingly I would have never thought I would have gotten to, particularly partners, and having conversations and networking with people here has been really a big opening for my business. But I think that it is difficult to kind of transition if you're working overseas and in the American market. That's a reality that you can't necessarily just work a 10 to 5 schedule, and that affects your day. It affects your the way you operate. It's tiring. So I think that's the biggest challenge for me. But thank God, parnasa-wise and business-wise, it's been very fruitful. So thank God.
Do you feel like you're acclimated to the night work hours?
Yeah, I think I'm very flexible in a way, so I don't work every day from 3 to 11 like some guys do, so it opens,
I think that's key, the flexibility, because when you work like we do, starting let's say 4 o'clock in the afternoon till midnight or later, the rest of the world or the rest of the country operates a normal time. So weddings will be happening at night. The things that people want to go out for dinner, it happens at night. So you do have that challenge where you have to work around these things. You're invited to a wedding, you got to go to the wedding. You got to figure out how to
take a day off of work.
You can't take a day off work, but what you do is you'll start earlier, you work later. You find ways to be
And I
flexible.
think the other thing
that
that's
is an interesting adaptation that you have to do.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's very interesting is Sundays. So Sundays it's the best and the worst day. It's the best day because in Israel it's a work day, and obviously Fridays is our off day. We're really like, okay, Sunday's the best day to get a ton of work done. Nobody's calling you, nobody's reaching out. You just it's down and focus, and you can work 4 or 5 hours and just accomplish what you would in 10 hours.
Yeah, more than makes up for the time you lose on Friday because of Shabbat.
Yeah, exactly. But on the other hand, it's like when you're used to having the day off on Sunday, it's like weird. We wake up early to learn, and it's like we're waking up at 7 instead of having the extra hour.
You're waking up at 7.
I'm waking up at 7. It's true. Yeah. But it's like a real day. It's like a Monday. Sunday is a Monday. It's strange.
By the way, I think it's a great thing that the time difference is 7 hours because it works out really well. Because when you're about to go dinner you could still have dinner with your family and that. Because you're going to have dinner with your family. It's like 6, 7 o'clock. It's lunchtime in New York. So the rest of your department is going and having lunch while you're having dinner. So that works out really nicely as well, more or less.
So your transition, I would imagine, is a little more complicated than what we're. Proficiency in Hebrew is only one issue. I'm sure there was other issues in the medical field that I think would be very important because a lot of professionals would take your advice seriously.
One thing I alluded to earlier is being in contact with Nefesh B'Nefesh. So I'm a pediatrician, but they help all medical professionals make Aliyah, whether you're a speech therapist, OT, PT, a dentist, psychologist. This all falls under this medical umbrella, and they really could help drive your path. But for me personally, one of the challenges was I had to find a hospital to take me on for about a year to convert my license over into an Israeli license. And that was a bit challenging after speaking to many medical programs. They wanted me to enter their program as if I didn't do training before, and I would have to do nights and weekends and spend time away from the family. Thankfully, I was able to find a program at Schneider Children's Hospital where the menahelet of the department, which is the department head, was super, super nice, took me under her wing and said, I understand you're making Aliyah, you did this before, come into my department and we'll take it easy on you. So I didn't have to do nights or Shabbatot. And she also gave me a 2-month kind of ulpan period where I was in the department, but I didn't really have any responsibility, where I was able to work on my Hebrew. So coming from Yeshiva Flatbush, I'm from Brooklyn, I definitely had a base of Hebrew. But when I made Aliyah, I haven't used spoken Hebrew in many years, so I definitely needed that period to brush up. And I was going home just reading notes, studying flashcards, practicing my Hebrew until I felt more comfortable. So that was one of the challenges. Thankfully for most Olim now, they changed the law and you no longer have to do that conversion period after you get approved, after you submit all of your documentation. So that process has gotten exponentially easier for most Olim from America once you get approved. Now, once I completed that transitional period, the next step is finding a job. So, like I said earlier, you have to speak to many people. I spoke to a lot of the different kupot in different regions. So the kupot
That's like the HMOs.
Yeah, so the kupot are 4 different HMOs in Israel that employ most medical professionals. And just like any field, there are nuances to employment. So everybody could be telling you one thing, but maybe there is a special opportunity that you can seek out just because of your natural skill set as an English speaker. If you live in a very Anglo neighborhood, There's a high demand for English-speaking doctors, and that could also help with the transition. So really figuring out where you want to be, and then once you figure that out, you have to speak to the correct people.
What was more your experience?
Me personally, I work in a very Haredi neighborhood now, which is Haredi Israeli, so there are no English speakers, which is fine. But I did have opportunities to work in Yerushalayim, in Ramat Eshkol, where there are more Anglo speakers. There was that opportunity, and I'm sure there are other opportunities you find out. Is there a specific question from anyone?
Just curious that your experiences are very valuable to.
Yeah, overall, that's been my experience. The EMR, once you get used to it, it's not a difficult system at all. But just like any EMR system, you have to learn where to click, and once you get that done, you'll be fine.
How do you compare the bureaucracies? Do you find more satisfaction being a doctor here or being a doctor in New York? Is there a difference?
So I would say it depends where you are in your career path. So I made Aliyah directly after completing my residency. So I didn't have that experience of working as a community pediatrician in New York, catering towards the community. So I don't know what that experience is like per se, but it is very fulfilling living here and being able to treat Am Yisrael. Overall, I really do enjoy the experience here. About a year ago, I decided to volunteer and become a reserve soldier in the Army, but as a medical professional. So I did 2 weeks of training. Most recently, I did a month of reserve duty on base as a doctor, and that was extremely fulfilling. It was very special to be able to put on an IDF uniform. I went on the base a few days a week as a doctor, and I was seeing soldiers on base for any complaint that came up. It was regular medicine, bread and butter, medical needs that come up, infection of the skin, elbow pain, back pain, very much up my alley. There are other doctors and paramedics that were doing more intense work, which I didn't take part of, but it was a sense of pride and giving back to Am Yisrael in my very small way. So that was really, really special.
So Matt, you were beginning to tell us about how you got the business you're in now. So tell us about what you're doing now. And really, I'm curious, so you have a customer base basically in the States. Are they more inclined or less inclined to deal with somebody who they know they can't see when they want to see? Or
I'll tell you that I'll bring everything forward. So I made Aliyah in August of 2020, and I started this new career in the VC world as the head of investor relations for micro VC. And it wasn't the job I thought it was. And I realized I really didn't know the industry. And from day one, I was banging my head against the table trying to learn the industry. And coming out of traditional working capital lending, the VC world is very high risk. And I wasn't used to that type of environment. And ultimately, once I learned the industry after a few months, I realized this wasn't for me. It's not a place for me. And I didn't spend 15 years building up a reputation and a name within the New York lending world to flush it down the toilet to reinvent myself. So the first thing that I could tell people to do is don't try and do something new. See how you could take what you're doing and make that work here.
Utilize your transferable skills.
Exactly. Even if you have a career, see how you could service that career from here, or that customer base from here. So about 9 months later, I said I can't do this anymore, and I just resigned. And with the idea that I knew there was 3 different avenues that I was going to work on, and we'll see if we can make it work. I went back to Deal for the summer, and I started working on my current business, which is the Bespoke Banker, which was basically saying, okay, back in 2010, I had a concept of what I'm doing now. And I said, I tried to do it then, but I didn't have the pedigree, I didn't have the network, I didn't have the client base to do it. So now, fast forward, 11 years later, I had that. So I went back to my former clients, I went back to my prospect list, I went back to the lenders that were within my network, and I met with everybody. I said, this is the concept I want to do, do you think it's viable? And they said yes. So I sat down, I put together a business plan, I launched a website, and we went at the end of June to Deal, and by August that summer I had my first client. Now you asked the question about servicing these clients from Israel, and I'll tell you that 100% of my client base is Jewish. Now that doesn't mean that we haven't had clients that weren't Jewish, it doesn't mean that we don't discriminate at all. But what's amazing about that is that when I tell people I'm living in Israel, they see the quality of the work that's getting done. And then also I'm traveling back every 6 to 8 weeks to have in-person meetings and also networking within the lending network that I had established. There's no issues. In fact, they're very positive about supporting the work I'm doing and the fact that I'm living here. And they want me to be able to live here. And they see that the quality of work is a better quality of work, and that has to do with the work day. Now, I'll tell you that when we'll probably get into it more, family life for me is awesome. I love having the whole day to do whatever. I'm half a day, I'm semi-retired, and half the day I'm working my abo off. But I love that schedule. In fact, when we go back in the summer to deal, which you can do, a lot of us go back to the summer and deal and see family and spend time with them. I find that I fall behind. I can't work a regular New York East Coast day on East Coast hours. I don't have my quiet prep time. It's a real problem. And I don't feel like I'm missing out by not being stateside because I travel back every 6 to 8 weeks. I have the meetings with my clients who want to support my business in Israel. I find I haven't skipped a beat. The business, thank God, has grown. I'm able to employ another employee here in Israel. And with the focus also on being able to help community members from Brooklyn and Deal, or just in general, the United States that want to make Aliyah here, that if I could give them a job or help them start a career that they could transition here,
Nice.
then we're doing that. I have another employee, Bezrat Hashem, he'll be doing that as well. And I think also with you, Moshe, I think what you're doing is very important because what you're being allowed to do, a lot of business owners in the community need to consider, and they need to see that the quality of work increases and it doesn't skip a beat, and you're there to support people when the rest of the company may not be around. And that is one of the easiest ways for the transition to happen from the US to Israel.
Into that a little bit.
But it's funny you say that because I was never a conventional business hours kind of guy. I'm not a morning person, and so I would never show up to work before 10 o'clock. And when I moved to Israel, my boss would be reaching out to me for something at 8:30 his time. He likes to make all his calls from the car at 8 in the morning on the way to work. And now every time he calls, he's reaching me, and I'm picking up. He's like, wow, if I would have known that I could reach you at 8 in the morning, I would have shipped you off to Israel a long time ago. He tells me. But you did make a really good point about the hours. There's a lot to be said for that. And I always say I can never go back to regular New York hours. I can never work like a daytime, and then I wouldn't know what to do with myself at night.
Transition into that, since it came up a number of times.
Yeah.
What are the advantages of working at 4 o'clock in the afternoon?
So the advantage of working for us is you have the whole day for a number of things which you can choose. You can, as Matt said, you can prepare for your day before the mad rush. Because some of us, we have jobs where as soon as the day starts, it's nonstop emails and phone calls and meetings and this and that. Here you actually can take 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, whatever you want, to get things done quietly before anyone starts bothering you. And you get a lot that I knock out so many things at that point so that I can actually go into these meetings not just prepared, but also I don't have in the back of my mind, oh my God, I have all these things that I have to still take care of at the end of the day.
About the quality of life, the personal
Quality of life is
personal life,
yeah.
yeah.
I started off, I got here, and every day I'm free all day till work starts for the most part. And you start off, you spend time with the family, you go to shopping, trips, dealing, hikes, everything. You do that for a certain amount of time, and then at a certain point I was like, I need a little something else to do. And so I became an EMT and then eventually an ambulance driver with Ichud Salah. And you feel like you're giving back to the country as well. You feel like you're contributing, you're able to do something. And then I still had more time left, so I joined the police, and now I'm with the police, Dean, and I still had some more time. I joined the firefighter, Kabbaut, and then I joined the army too in Miluim.
But I think it's important what you said before, because
You can't do any of
No,
this.
you can't do this because also you're at the prime of your consciousness in the mornings until and in the evening. I'm in the summertime when I'm coming home from work at 6. I'm like, maybe I want to
You're
work
not
out,
gonna do any
but I can't.
volunteering at that
Well,
point.
I end up going in the pool and I just float there. Like you become a couch potato. Here you have, I feel at least for me, the entire day is productive.
It
And then
feels
when
like-
when my brain turns to mush, I'm just going into bed.
Yeah.
That's it. It's great.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it is.
and what's
helpful.
interesting is that when you start work, it doesn't work in the reverse. Like you don't start work and want to just lie in a pool type of thing. You just have a whole new energy because you're like it's a mental thing. You're starting work. This is my job, and you work. And sometimes I'll actually have a whole day where I'll be doing like an 8-hour police shift, and then I go and start work, and then I might actually work till the morning. Like sometimes if it's a busy day at work and you lose track of time, and same like when you're in New York, you might work a 9 to 5 day, 9 to 6 day. But then you might have a lot of extra stuff and you end up at the office till 9, 10 o'clock at night. It's the same thing, except 9, 10 o'clock, you work until the morning, then you got shahrit and you go for a
But
nap.
also, I mean, you saw your kids growing up a lot more here than
Yeah,
you did in
I remember distinctly when I used to work in New York, I would not get home before easily 8, 9 o'clock, and at that time my kids were young. They would go to sleep by 8:30, 9 o'clock, and then in the morning, they're already off to school, and I don't see them in the morning. I don't see them at night. I would see them just basically on Shabbat. and
You're a
Sunday.
Shabbat,
I was a
Shabbat parent. Yes.
parent.
I
That
was
is,
the same thing by me. Now in the mornings, I sit down, I go
Yeah.
over everything going on with each of my kids with my wife, The kids are healthier
You
mentally.
get to watch them grow up.
Your same experience, or the doctor's different?
No, doctor life is different than that over here.
You're watching other kids.
We're-
No, yeah,
working
you
Israeli
and Ezra
hours.
have to give the perspective
Yeah.
of what it's like working regular.
It's like
Israeli
working in
hours.
America at the same time.
Right.
But one last point that we touched on, that I want just also the challenge is the traveling. You do it more often. I did it in the beginning. I went back every month to 2 months for a week and a half each time. It can be a lot, and I think also it's worth exploring because times have changed now. When I did that was pre-COVID, when everybody went to an office. After COVID, so many tools proliferated in the work industry for Microsoft Teams and collaboration tools and things like that. So
More work
people
from
got
home.
used to it, and it became acceptable to work remotely. In fact, most of my department, even those who live in New York, no longer come to the office. We all work remotely now ever since COVID. And so I think you find that you can do that. Now my traveling, I go maybe 2-3 times a year. It used to be 10 times a year. A lot of people don't realize, they think I got to be in the office. And if you stop and really think about it, you might realize that you can work remotely a lot more easily than you think.
I was going to add to the travel just very quickly, and I think it's very important to transition. But I do 4-day blitzes. So I fly out on Sunday. I'm back on that plane Thursday. I'm coming home for Shabbat, and I don't skip a beat. And I recover over the weekend, and by Monday, I'm right back at the desk, like catching up. Nothing ever, no beat has been skipped. And
Beautiful.
yes, it's doable. It's very manageable.
What I wanted to ask you, Ezra, is now you work for a high-tech firm. Is there a culture that, because let's say you didn't do university here, are you missing out on something? Is it connections? Well, now you're here. You're working here is fine. Now you want to advance. Maybe
Advance.
in New York, the way they advance, from what I said from my nephews in high-tech, is you keep looking for another job. Keep looking for another-
I don't think anyone necessarily looked at my credentials and said, oh, your credentials are American. It doesn't really equate with what we have here. The truth is, I didn't necessarily utilize those credentials for what I'm working in. I studied marketing, but I went into technical and customer support. Once I had that first company that gambled on me and said, oh, you did account management, customer support, that's close enough. They took me in. I had 3.5-4 years in that company. I proved myself in that initial role. And I think more than those credentials, the Israeli employers are looking for experience. They really bank on experience. Yes, you do have to have some sort of credential in terms of if you're supposed to be a developer, then you got to know you know the languages, that sort of thing. So I would say that in all of my experience in the interviews and getting hired, things like that, they were always very interested in what have you done? What have you gotten your hands dirty with? And in terms of the different types of work in high tech, so I would say there's more transferability, while others there's less. If you need to be if you're looking at development and that sort of thing, they need to know that you know the languages. For someone who is working in sales or in support, they might say, we don't need you to know any real technical stuff. We need to know that you know how to answer an email professionally. We need to see that you can communicate properly with clients. So a lot of that kind of stuff, they're not necessarily looking for a degree for, but they're actually happy to just interact with you and see what you've done and say, oh, okay, you seem like a good communicator. You seem like you can put together a few sentences in an email. And in my experience, they're very experience-based.
One of the things that I found difficult, which is why I had to open my own business, or it led to that, is I actually interviewed for a discount bank in a very good position within the the tech lending division. And when I interviewed, they told me, you're exactly what we want and what we need. But we have another candidate that's fluent in Hebrew and that can read legal docs in Hebrew. So you're probably better for building out our business, but we don't think you're going to be able to, even though all the communication externally was in English, the internal communication was all in Hebrew. And they told me, because you don't have an expertise in that language, we don't think you're going to be able to learn it fast enough or to carry yourself. So we have to go with that other candidate. So I'm just curious about what your experience was with the language.
So I think it's very diverse in terms of from company to company. Some will be more, you need to have a high level of Hebrew for this type of job. Others will say, we don't care if Hebrew. You're talking to American or European clients, you need English. So it's not really important. It also depends. At my previous job, it was also a tech company. It was an international company, but we had about 60 employees in Israel, maybe another 70 or 80 in the US. And in that company, the language of the office in Israel was Hebrew. So at lunch, you chat in Hebrew. When people would collaborate, the meetings were in Hebrew. The second 4 o'clock hits, you get on the American schedule, everything would switch. Oh, we're having an all-hands meeting with the CEO back in the States. Everything's now in English, and sometimes the Israelis are speaking broken English.
You're the hero now.
And right, they're coming to you for help in English because you have it as a native language. But there's definitely, it's diverse. My company currently, the standard language is in English, and it's also an international company. We're the Israeli arm of an international company, and the main language of the company is English. I don't think I've ever seen, aside from my contract that I had to sign, they gave me a version in English and a version in Hebrew. Aside from that, I've never needed Hebrew for this particular role. All the clients are English speaking, so all communication with clients is going to be in English. There have been places where I've interviewed where they very much look at Hebrew and they say, our R&D is an Israeli team, they speak Hebrew. We need someone who really understands them at their native language, and those companies are very particular about good bilingual skills. And I would say, having worked in one of my roles, it was a bilingual role. I was dealing with Israeli and American clients. I got to brush up my Hebrew, and then what was interesting is the next 2 jobs after that, I didn't need the Hebrew at all. I brushed up and I learned it, but then the following 2 companies didn't really care about it. They said, all your work is going to be in English, so it wasn't important to them. So it really depends on the company
and the profession.
And the profession, exactly.
Yeah, I want to shift gears a little bit with you, Ezra, because Moshe and Matt spoke about the families and how it would play. You work for 2 Israeli companies so far.
Four now.
Four
now, yeah.
Are they all similar in their employee-employee relations? Is it family friendly? Is it the atmosphere? Are you comfortable there with regards to how it affects your family life?
In general, most of my roles have been very similar in the sense that they were 8 or 9 hour days. I'm starting at either 10 a.m., 9 a.m., working to 6 or 7. So I'm there for shipping the kids off to school in the morning. I'm able to even have a little bit of downtime in the morning.
It's unusual for Israeli companies. Usually Israeli startups.
So that's because most of the companies, the tech companies that I've worked with, they've been doing a later start because they want you to overlap with the US enough so that you can collaborate with the US teams. So my current role, for example, when I interviewed, they said, "Do you want to start at 9 or at 10?" They said, "We're flexible. Our rush comes in at 4 p.m. because that's when America wakes up. You'll be dealing with European clients, Asian clients in the morning time, but in general, we don't need you early. We don't need you here at 7 a.m. We don't need you here early. We want you to start whatever's convenient for you." I said, "Start me at 10. I said, 10 is good for me. I finish at 7, get home 7:30, tuck the kids in."
And then generally, people, when you have requests, you have this time off. I mean, I
Oh,
don't know,
that
what's
sense-
the rigidity of these Israeli companies?
So for
Jewish
Israeli
holiday is a big plus.
So yeah, for Israeli companies, in my experience, 3 out of 4 of the companies have been very generous, easygoing with time off. One great benefit is the Israeli holidays, Jewish holidays. You're off. I think it's obviously we only have 1 day of Yom Tov, so you have the Yom Tov, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot. You're going to be off. Simchat Torah, you're off. You don't have to take those. Those are built into the system that you're off. Yom HaAtzmaut, you're off. Rosh Hashanah, Kippur, off. All these are granted days, and you don't ever have to apply for vacation. You don't have to apply PTO. In the companies that I've worked at, some of them have been more flexible. A lot of the tech companies like to do this unlimited PTO. It's like as long as your manager approves it, and that's very common these days. You get your job done. You're not leaving any openings where there's no coverage. So I definitely feel that I have a good work-life balance, and I do see that in the tech sphere here. I definitely see people. There is also something to be said for advancing your knowledge. So what that means is, okay, I've hit the glass ceiling at my role now, and I said in order to get promoted, I need to learn a new development language, I need to learn new CRMs, new systems, that sort of thing, or I need to get a certain degree or qualification in order to be able to move into a new role. So there is you have people in their 30s, 40s, sometimes saying, I'm doing a course on the side, I'm learning this new development language, I'm learning HTML, whatever it is, because they say that's the next way into things. So
It's a lot more common here in Israel for people to have second degrees.
They're constantly
Very
reinventing themselves.
Yeah, but what I will say is a lot of times it's not like a university degree. They go to an online course, 4-month course.
Vocational.
Exactly. Vocational training. A lot of it is they're not looking for a degree. They say, you did this course, you got, you know the language, you know exactly, you have a certificate, Amazon certificate, great, you're good. You don't need necessarily a diploma from a vetted university.
Okay, Saul, we want to round off the work-life family balance with your experiences.
Sure. Most doctors that I speak to and most of my colleagues, I would say, are probably working about 35 to 40 hours a week. Obviously, if you want to work more than that and make more money, you can. There's such a tremendous need here for doctors and medical professionals. They'll just keep on giving you hours, as many as you want. It's really up to you. With that being said, the schedule can be variable. There are plenty of doctors that have to work evening hours 2 days a week. Maybe evening hours are from 4 to 7, but then they have the morning off. So it's a give and take because the HMOs, the clinics, have to be open after school rush, after work rush, and to be able to provide those services. With that being said, since there is such a high demand for medical professionals, it took me a little bit of time to realize this, but you can put some demands forward and see what the response is when you are going on job interviews. When I was interviewing for my current position, I interviewed for 3 different positions, and up front I told them I would like to have the summers off. One of the interviewees told me right away, not a problem. Another one said, I've done that in the past, it didn't work out. I don't want to do that. And the third interviewee said, also not a problem. So I'm able to go back to Jersey for a full 2 months, see my family, spend time with grandparents, cousins, aunts and uncles, which is obviously a very special time. And then the second interviewee, actually I got back to her and I said, I'm not going to take the position. She said, oh, why not? It seems like we fit everything you're asking for and it's a very great position. I said, I really need the summers off. She said, all right, you got it, no problem. So there is that demand and you have to play the game. And once you figure that out, you're able to fit your schedule and put that balance in. Next year, Bezrat Hashem, I won't be working any Fridays. A lot of doctors work 2 Fridays a month. That's normal in the medical world. But where I am at now, they agreed to not give me Fridays. So I do think overall, doctors here live a very good life. There's a great work-life balance. You're able to be home with the kids, send them off to school. I'm not there yet specifically because I have a little bit of a unique situation. But Bezrat Hashem, next year my schedule will be much lighter. And a big thing is once I leave work, nobody's calling me. The way the medical system here works is after hours, each of the HMOs kind of have a urgent call phone number. So if something comes up, you're calling the hotline and not your specific doctor. So I leave work and then I'm able to devote my time and energy to other things, to my family and whatever other hobbies you may have. Good question.
I have a question for Ricky, if it's possible. I'm just curious because we have other individuals that moved here to Ra'anana that have a partner behind, that left behind. And I'm curious just what, we're talking about family life, like those relationships, but really your partner is a spouse almost. So I'm sure there's a lot of people back in the community where they have partners and they're not so sure how a partner will react. I'm just curious how that relationship developed, and does your partner feel like that he's pretty much like running the show, having it all on his shoulders, or I'm curious how that
works.
If
you ask my partner, he would definitely say, Joe, if he's going to watch this, he's going to say 100% he's running the business, and he's very much been like monumental in my transition to moving to Israel, I would say for sure. But we have a very healthy relationship and we complement each other. So I support him from here, he supports me from there.
How did you broach this subject?
And the truth of the matter is, when we decided to move, we were working collaboratively, but we weren't yet fully partners. I just told him, like, matter of fact, I'm moving to Israel in 9 months, and we'll figure it out. And I think that was a big risk on my part. I think he understood. Okay, it's either do or die. Either we're working together, we're gonna build this business up, or
separate ways.
It's gonna be a big transition, and that was definitely a risk and a factor on my end. And I think at the end of the day, it developed over time. There were definitely its challenges. He communicated with me a lot about wanting me to be more available, in which case I changed my schedule a lot to try to accommodate. So my schedule happens to be throughout the week very variable. I don't work like the same time every single day. On Tuesdays specifically, I give a full American schedule. I'm on from about 3 o'clock until 11 o'clock. So that's like a full American day. Again, on Mondays and Thursdays, I give hours at night, I give hours in the morning. So I think I definitely try to accommodate on my end. But I think, yeah, it's a good point. I think if you do have a partner and you're moving to Israel, I think it's important to have that trust factor with whom you're working with. But I also think it's a very helpful situation. Like if you have a company that's in the States, if you're planning to do business in the States and to have a presence on the ground there. Right now, my company is really a split. In fact, I think think we're more people here in Israel on my team than we are in America, which is surprising because I never thought I would have people that I'd be collaborating and working with here in Israel when I envisioned moving to Israel. But it works great. We're developing the company, we're doing a lot of business development, and we're making decisions based on things that are happening here as well as things that are happening there. And it's been, I can't personally complain. I'm sure it's a different experience for everybody. It's a challenge for some people to get the okay to move to begin with. They're working for somebody. But I think for me, it's been smooth. It's had its bumps in the road, but it's been good overall.
Our final topic that we want to discuss is not related to the type of work or the transition or the adaptation to Israel society. It's more bottom line. We work, have satisfaction in what we do, we like what we do, but there's also the financial drive that we have, that we need, and that's why we work. And so, without getting into specifics, into dollars and cents, but you're working, you're making your paycheck, you're making your money. Where do you see more financial rewards in terms of the net, the bottom line? Is it in New York or is it in Israel? It's a little less burden to your situation.
Yeah. I can touch on it very quickly if you want, but because I did work for about a year in the U.S. workforce. I aside from small internships and during college, I did work in the U.S. That first job that I had was 22, 23 years old. In the US, it was an entry-level job, wasn't anything too exciting. What was very different coming to the Israeli workforce was the entry-level job was about 50% of that salary. What I did at that point, I was like shocked. I said, oh my God, how am I going to make ends meet? I looked at my bills and I said, you know what, I'm not spending as much. One thing was in Brooklyn, when I lived in Brooklyn and I worked this job, I didn't really have too many bills. I was living at home with my parents, I was young. So at that point, things was profit. I didn't really have any responsibility. In Israel, I had to pay my own rent, I was paying my own bills, my own food, all that stuff. But I looked at the salary they offered me. They told me also, they said, this is just an initial to get you started, first 2 months, we'll see how you do, and then we could talk about a little bit more. But even I said, looking at the flat numbers, you're offering me 50% of what I made 6 months ago. So it was a big blow to self-esteem. Oh my God, is this what they're offering? But I looked at my bills and I said, you know what? I'm still going to make enough to live. I'm going to make enough to put a little bit, really a little bit into savings. And I did that for a couple of months until they said, okay, we realized you actually can do what you say you can do. We're willing to give you a raise, give you some incentives, things like that. For me, it was definitely a shocker in the beginning, but it was manageable.
I think there's two aspects that you look at.
I just want to ask,
Yes.
do you feel like you're lacking?
Right now, no, I don't feel like I'm lacking. But I will say from that starting point, it was a little scary. It was definitely a shocker. But where I am now, I've gone up the ranks a little bit and advanced and so on. Right now, I don't think so.
So I think that's a good question. I say, are you lacking? Because there's also, the question is, and one thing I notice is, yeah, you can always have more. But what is enough? And I think one thing I notice a stark difference living in Israel is they know how to live. They don't enjoy life. I just remember feeling like...
You mentioned before the cafe. I think it's a shock to the system of any Olim from the States, not from Europe, from the States, when they come in and see what the cafe culture is here. And it's something that really it integrates to your work life, your personal life, and it's something which...
Integrates in the work life too. You have work meetings. It's one of those things, like, I just remember the stark difference when you're in New York. I felt the hamster on the wheel all the time. You're constantly running in place and you don't even know how far you're getting ahead. And then you come here and people just, they might have crazy jobs or they might work like crazy. They might have tough things to worries and concerns, but they still know how to live. They still go to the beach, and on Fridays they still relax with their family. They still know how to go on vacation. They still know that doesn't change. And so there is the question of how much do you really need? But then also the question of what you said, really, which is the expenses. You don't realize it. I didn't even realize it, but I made Aliyah and I left behind a tuition. And at the time, my kids were all young, and yet my tuition was hitting 6 figures. And this was 11, 12 years ago. And from what I hear now, it's even more insane. And then I come here and I sign my kids up to school, and I just remember that the experience was a little bit weird for me. It was like Twilight Zone. I go sign up, and it wasn't a public school. A lot of people go to public schools in Israel, and this was like what they call a semi-private school. And I signed them up, and the secretary goes, I just have to tell you, this is not for free. There's a little bit of a fee. I said, oh, how much is the tuition? So she tells me $4,000. I'm like, dollars or shekel? She goes, no, shekel. I'm like, for a month? She goes, no, for the year. I was like, can I lock it in for all the kids, for everything? You know where I'm coming from? So you realize tuition is a huge relief off your shoulders. Healthcare, another huge relief off your shoulders. The healthcare system here is, for the most part, free. I pay maybe $1,000 a year, $2,000 a year for all the supplementary stuff, or whatever it is.
Private.
Yeah, you can always go private for like way more things, and that I do have separate policies that I would recommend anyway, especially if you're an independent worker or things like that. But that aside, there's so much less that you have to pay for. People say, oh, but groceries are so expensive in Israel. Okay, so we could pick one or two things like gas and groceries that might be more expensive in Israel, but at the end of the day, you want to go out to eat with your wife, you want to, restaurants are cheaper here, hanging out cheaper, no tuition, healthcare, you really have a much lower level. So even if you're taking a hit, you're taking a hit in reference to what you think you're going to need in America, but what you don't realize is even with a hit here, you're still ahead of the game.
I think one of the big things that's hard to get over is if you're transitioning into the Israeli workforce, I think just you kind of have to take a step back and say the number is not really what matters, meaning the percentage of what it was to what it is now is not really what matters. Before it was 100,000 and now it's 50,000. Okay, so that's fine as long as the 50,000 is going to allow you to live normally.
For me, the catalyst that was able to convince my wife to allow me to begin to explore Israel was the fact that I was becoming a psychopath every February of every year when I had to put together a tuition assistance package that was far greater than any loan package that I was putting together for my clients. And when I was telling my wife we could only go out for pizza once a week and we can't go out any other time because they're going to see it on the application, and I don't want them to think that we have more than we do. And we're going to vacation to California this year because we're going to see my grandparents, and we can't go to Aruba and we can't do this because they're going to say you had enough money to spend on Aruba, and so you have enough money to spend on tuition, which wasn't the case. And every March when I got my bonus, which I was one of the highest paid at my age, one of the highest paid employees on the line, which is in originations, and literally I would get the money deposited on a Friday, and on a Monday, the entire amount was swept over to the yeshivot, and it wasn't living. We weren't living. I would say, just a side note, that those that are making Aliyah from blue states, high tax states like New York, New Jersey, it's a much easier transition here to Israel than, say, Florida or Texas, because in those states they don't have these layers of state and city taxes like how they do in those cities. But that's just a side note.
And there's also the question of what's the next generation. That was one of the things that I said. If I'm struggling this much for tuition, and I was making a decent living, a very nice living, and yet I'm still felt like I was like struggling. What are my kids facing? It's only getting worse. And what are my kids facing? I said, if I don't bring them up in an environment where they can thrive better and not have to have the same worries that I had of the hamster on the wheel and the stress and like that, I love that opportunity, and so that's why that was one of the main reasons why I took it.
Are you working to live or living to work?
Exactly.
So one of the things that first of all, the culture here is not a consumption culture. Nobody looks at the other person to see what they have.
They don't
Right?
care.
They don't care. Why?
Driving,
Because
what your house is.
They care what you do. It's interesting.
they care what you do. Yeah.
What do you do?
What do you do? What do you make? What do you do?
No,
But-
not money-wise. Not money-wise.
No, but they want to make sure that they're not a fryer. They want to make sure they're negotiating the same amount. But
No, you wonder what
No,
your
right.
accomplishments are.
so I'll tell you that I was making 10%. The first year I was making 10% of what I was making. Now I have a business, thank God. I don't really know if my net is less, more, the same. I do know that when we want to go out for dinner, we go out for dinner. When we want to go on vacation, we go on vacation. Tuition, I was sitting in a meeting for school for my daughter, and they said it's semi-private, and they said that the tuition is going to be 1,700 shekel a month, and which is a lot.
It's a high one.
But that's also, it's 2 meals a day, and ultimately that's for room and board, because it's in the city over, and it's a pneumiat. So during the week she's there.
More expensive to have her at home?
And also, at the time, they were telling us what the cost would be when they reached that age, and I started laughing, and everybody around me was aghast. And I looked around and they were looking at me like, why are you laughing? And I'm going, well, because you're not paying $25,000, $30,000 to have your kid bust 3 blocks down to a day school. So, I would say, yeah, gas is more expensive. Housing is probably at par, depending on which city you go to, maybe a little less. Groceries are a little more, but you don't eat as much. You definitely don't eat as much. We're very healthy looking.
That's a new one.
No, you don't eat as much.
I eat the same.
Well, the packages are smaller, but you're saving, at least for the first 10 years, you're saving on taxes, you're saving on tuition. You don't have a $30,000 a year healthcare plan on
And you're not a psychopath.
And you're not a psychopath.
And you have the family time.
Depends who you
Living like a person.
I say my quality of life has improved. Am I making more? I don't know.
I don't care.
And I don't care because, as I told my wife before, I said, you think you're living life, but you don't know what living life is like. You don't really know what happiness is. And happiness is when you're just living. And I find that here, even those that are complaining about being here or complaining, I don't make enough, or when I go meet Israelis that did Yerida in the States, they all say the same thing. They have a lot of materialism, but there's one thing that they say universal, is that I would have loved my kids to grow up in Israel. And that they all say the same thing. They think they have a nice life of materialism, but they understand that they gave up something for their kids and their child's experience.
We did exactly the opposite.
But from a financial pressure, I do not have any of those same pressures that I had back in Brooklyn.
So I would say overall, you make less but spend less, like everyone is saying. With that being said, also your expectations have to change. So when you're in Brooklyn, you may be able to buy a big home with a yard. Here in Israel, it's different. It's different type of living. It's more European. Depending on what city you are in, you may have to get a nice garden apartment. But overall, doctors in this country are one of the highest earners. So you'll live an amazing, beautiful life. You'll be able to spend time with your family. You'll be home for Shabbat, on holidays. At nights, you're off. You're not plugging away, putting 50, 60-hour weeks. So overall, the work-life balance is so much better, in my opinion. In terms of the bottom line, like I said, I made Aliyah directly after residency, so I don't know what my future income would have been if I were to stay in New York and Brooklyn, being a community doctor. But doctors here live an amazing life, and most people I speak to are very happy with their decision about Aliyah. There are difficulties, there is bureaucracy, but overall people are very happy.
Would you say that's throughout, or maybe the beginning might be a little bit tough to find your footing?
So I think I'm still in that beginning stage where I am finding my footing. I'm transitioning to a new job next year, and there is that transition period of figuring out the system, making connections, and meeting the right people to find that job and position that works for you and your family, and how much money do you want to make. It does take a little time, just like in any industry. It seems like I'm hearing from Ezra, you were in 4 different companies in Israel. Matt came here with certain expectations, and he ended up opening his own business. Ricky, I'm not exactly sure the details. Was there a transition period here coming to Israel? But there will most likely be that transition period. But overall, you're making a very good living and you're living a great life.
Ricky, bottom line.
So bottom line, I would say
Sum it up.
I would say uniquely, I'm in a different maybe category because I took my job from America and continued to work from here as an entrepreneur. I think for anybody who's considering Aliyah as an entrepreneur running your own business, I think I was fortunate to be able to continue to make what I make.
Yeah, but the point is, you make what you make.
You make what you
Provide you
make.
a better life.
I think Israel in general is less materialistic, and certain things are not as important. So certainly, what you spend your money on is different. What you need to spend your money on, obviously, like tuition is a big one. For us, we weren't in the tuition rat race moving from America because our kids were very young. I do actually pay tuition that I think is more expensive for Celine, my daughter, who's 3 here, relative to what I would have paid in America. So I do feel a little bit, but it's part of the daily expenses. I think, looking at it, I don't know that I spend less per se, maybe in certain categories for sure, but I've been able to maintain and make what we need, and it's very comfortable, thank God. And I think it's just what's a priority is very different. You're not looking to drive the most expensive car, you're not looking to rent the most expensive house. Like you're just very comfortable being where you are, and you're not looking at other people. And I think that's just the culture here. Like people don't care. People don't care if you're on a bicycle every day. People don't care if you're driving the most amazing car or a regular car. Like, it just doesn't matter. It's not a priority. And you, like Matt said, like, you want to go out for dinner, you go out for dinner. You want to do this, you want to do that. Like, I've always been, thank God, fortunate in America to be able to afford everything we needed to there, and thank God over here too. But I think, like, what you allocate your time, your mental energy, I think just mentally I'm much more clear-headed. I think everybody here would say the same, and I think you're able to just prioritize more of your time towards things that are more important here. And you're not so focused on, okay, I have to make $10 million and I have to afford this and this vacation and that vacation and this tuition and that tuition. You're just focused, okay, I go to work, I have to make a parnasa, that's what I do, and the rest of the time I could learn, I could be with my family, I can spend time with my wife, I can play tennis, I can do a lot of different things that at the end of the day I wasn't doing as much. And I'll just say a side point, like when we moved, this is totally irrelevant, but I think totally irrelevant is that we got rid of our TV, and best thing we ever did when we moved to Israel is you just don't feel the need to be sucked into all the things that
I second that. We got rid of our TV as well when we made Aliyah.
Yeah, you're just not sucked into that life. Like, you don't care. It just doesn't matter.
You could be 3 hours on a plane to go to Florida from Brooklyn, or you could be 3 hours on a plane and go to Paris. It's a whole new world that opens up.
We're going to wrap this up with final thoughts, final advice. What you want to sum up in 1 or 2 sentences? Advice to people that are listening. It could be advice, could be encouragement, could be just hi mom, whatever you want to say. It's up to you. So let's wrap that up.
Yeah, if you're like me and you are making Aliyah pre-workforce, pre-workforce, before you have properly entered the workforce, or early on in the workforce, you're not coming with a family and lots of financial responsibility, I definitely would say come in with an open mind, come in with the idea that you might pivot, you may have studied a particular degree, and see how that sort of manifests in Israel. See what people who did that in Israel are doing these days, because you might have thought, I'm going to go into this particular niche job, but that's not something that's necessarily needed in the Israeli workforce. So just keep an open mind, maybe be prepared to pivot, be prepared to keep your options open. That's my advice.
Moshe?
I would say I can't stress this, think about the next generation, think about your kids, what kind of environment you want them to grow up in, what you see, where you're living now, what the future holds there versus what the future would be here. It's a huge difference in quality of life, a huge difference in the future. That's a very important part of it. But then additionally, talk to people, reach out to anyone. I'm happy to take any personal calls.
I think it's important. We may do a round table in the coming months talking specifically about raising children, the differences, and I have the husbands and wives here, but that's a great idea for people looking forward.
Okay. But also reach out. Don't say, I can't do this, or it's too difficult, or it sounds like a lot. It's a lot easier than you think, and
don't be afraid to ask your boss about
Be afraid to ask your boss too, exactly.
I would say don't try and reinvent yourself. If you have a career, if you have something that you become an expert or professional in, see how you can work that here, how you can bring that here and not necessarily lose out on what you have going on back in the States, because that's a mistake that I did. And I realized that for me, at least, in the career that I was in, I just had to figure out how I could utilize my network and my skill set that already existed, that I built up, and just be in a different location while still making that work. So don't think you're coming here and having to start a new industry. Very important, do not think you need to sell your company. Do not do that. Don't think you're gonna come open up a company here in Israel. It's not gonna happen, it's not gonna work. You need to figure out how to do what you're doing there, here, with the same group, the same people, the same everything that is there. Exactly. So
yeah, I think just, you said be open to pivot. Don't make that your goal. Be open to it, but ideally you want to come with a plan and where you don't have to pivot. But
he said something else, and you already built a career, throw it away.
Yeah, exactly. In my position, I didn't have a built career. I was fresh off the chopping block.
Yeah, you don't have to reinvent yourself.
University. So for me,
what you do.
Yeah, if you're starting out without any real experience basis, then keep your options open. If you've built something, you've made something of you got to 16 letters after your name and degrees, keep it. And obviously.
Doctor.
I would say look to those around the table here, look to all the other members of our community that made Aliyah, and think to yourself, if Ezra can do it, if Ricky can do it, if myself can do it, you can do it too. I think our community, we are go-getters, we are able to accomplish things that we put our mind to, and that has to be your mindset if you want to make Aliyah. That was my experience. I saw others that succeeded in the medical field making Aliyah. They're very happy, doing really well. And that's the way you have to approach Aliyah, and I think life in general. If somebody else could do it, you can do it as well.
I understand that now we have a strong foundation of support here.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true as well.
And in Jerusalem.
And
I think all of us have been speaking to families that are interested in making Aliyah and bouncing ideas off and giving advice. We're all here to lend that support. Give us a call, reach out on WhatsApp, and we're all here to help each other.
I think it's also important to say, if your situation doesn't reflect one of ours, and you want advice, we can probably all point you to someone who does have a similar
Yeah, that's a very
experience
good
to you.
point.
Because we may not have covered every single type of situation. We might have people, exactly, or every type of concern, but if you turn to me or to Saul or to anyone here, we could point you in the right direction, and we can tell you, oh, I know a guy who was just in the same situation, a very similar situation.
Good point.
Final thoughts, Ricky.
I would just say, as much as it's an unknown, transitioning from a career in the States to moving here, I think, in my experience, and I think for many people, the experience could be that it's very opportunistic. If you're an entrepreneur, if you run your own thing, if you're a consultant, there's a ton of talent here in Israel. The workforce here is incredible, and I think there's a lot of opportunities. And so I know, as much as it's maybe a scary thought, what I do there, how would I transition what I'm doing? And obviously everybody, according to their role, has to assess where they are. But I think if you're the type of person that's running your own shop or doing your own thing, I think that you could succeed very much here in Israel.
We want to thank all the panelists and all the great advice and sharing their experiences with you. And I want to thank the listeners. And again, like you reiterated, you need anything, just give us a call. We'll point you in the right direction. Shabbat Shalom if it's a Friday. Shabbat Tov if you're listening on Sunday. Take care.